Okay. Good evening. Welcome to the AI revolution, apparently, right now, right here. It's actually the AI revolution and rethinking money, identity, truth, and work. So just small subjects we're going to cover tonight. Promises to be a fascinating and timely and challenging discussion about how artificial intelligence is reshaping the foundations of business and society, transforming how we manage money, verify identity, navigate truth, and structure our workplaces. Now, before we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people, the traditional owners of the land on which Melbourne Connect and the University of Melbourne stands. We pay our respects to elders past and present. So tonight's event brings together three of the leading voices in finance, tech, and AI research to explore just a few of the emerging opportunities and risks AI represents in the just over an hour we have. So we're here as part of Melbourne Connect Innovation Week, which is returning for its 5th year this year. And it celebrates some of the groundbreaking collaborations, exploring novel solutions to global challenges like dropping your phone, and advancements that are driving transformation and societal change. And if you haven't had a chance, it's well worth having a look at that program. 30 events at 8 venues with 25 partners. But tonight, the focus is artificial intelligence, and we're doing this with 3 leading thinkers and doers. Stacey Warden, with a career spanning the Milken Institute, JP Morgan, NASDAQ, and the US Treasury Department. Stacey brings a global perspective on blockchain, digital identity, and the future of finance. And when she was first described to me, she was described as an AI rock star. Lenka, sitting up straighter. Lenka Badnarakova, Head of AI and Advanced Analytics at Australian Retirement Trust. She is a digital and AI strategist with over a decade of experience driving large-scale transformations across finance and technology. At ART, Lenka leads teams designing intelligent systems that create true business impact. Welcome, Lenka. And finally, Rob Moore, who'll be delivering the keynote speech tonight. Rob is the CTO and co-founder of MakerX, which has been recognised by Deloitte's TechFast 50, AFR Most Innovative Companies, and Best Workplaces Top 100. He is a serial entrepreneur at the AI frontier, co-founding MakerBoss and QRX, and more than qualified to talk about the opportunities and impacts of AI on money, identity, truth, and work. Rob.
Over the next 15 minutes, my goal, which is an ambitious goal, is to try to link AI with money, identity, truth, and work, and somehow do this without confusing everyone in the room. So we'll see how we go. And if I can successfully do that, then that sets things up for this awesome panel to explore those interesting topics. So let's dive in to these seemingly unrelated topics that are converging with technology to transform how we work, transact, trust, and authorize in an AI world. Now, business leaders today face a paradox. AI is simultaneously our greatest threat and our most promising opportunity. We worry that our industries are being disrupted. We worry that our competitors are moving faster than us, and we worry that our data is being compromised. I come to you today not only as an expert in implementing AI systems, but also a business leader in my own right. And I can tell you I lie there awake in the middle of the night worrying about these things as well. I worry about what's the future of software engineering going to be in 3 years? Will we need software engineers anymore? And is my company going to be irrelevant? I worry are my competitors going to be able to move faster than me? And many other things like that. And all of this is within the backdrop of things like this MIT report that got released a couple of months ago that said that despite $30 to $40 billion in enterprise investment in generative AI, 95% of organizations are getting zero return. So it's clear that we're in an environment which is a huge amount of chaos, fear, uncertainty, and doubt. But at the same time, there is a lot of opportunity and a lot of excitement, and there's a potential to do things that never before were possible, to magnify the impact that we have on this world, and to solve problems that were previously unsolvable. I know from my own perspective that I'm really excited from two perspectives. One, internal, that we can use AI to work smarter rather than harder and innovate the way that our company delivers value and that we work together, and that's quite exciting. And then from a second perspective, externally, the things that we might be able to do with the clients that we work with, and again, solve problems that previously were unsolvable and deliver value that previously wasn't able to be delivered. Now, regardless of whether or not you think that AI is a threat or an opportunity, it's undeniable that AI is everywhere. It's in the boardroom, it's in our water cooler conversations, and it's in our kids' homework. It's undeniable, it's impactful, but it's messy, confusing, and yes, scary. We're all asking the same questions, but I think the key one is, how do we navigate through this fog? How do we stop just kind of having analysis paralysis and standing there not knowing what to do? To navigate through this complexity and avoid becoming yet another failure statistic, I think we need a clear goal or North Star. Something that guides what technology we should adopt, which processes we should transform, which partnerships we should pursue. And without that clarity, we're just going to be digitizing yesterday's mistakes with really expensive complexity. The North Star that I propose is very straightforward but ambitious. We need AI to do valuable, economically meaningful, autonomous, trusted, reliable work on behalf of organizations and humans. So let's dig into that. Let's start with valuable. There's no point in using AI to automate tasks that don't have value. We need to make sure that the work we do is meaningful from a business or societal impact perspective. We don't just want to automate activity. Value has to shift from perpetual proof of concepts to production systems that have measurable impact. And that's one of the key things that MIT report that I referenced pointed out. This shift to production impact is the critical gap that most organizations are struggling with to bridge AI adoption. From an economically meaningful perspective, I think this can be really easily summarized by the old adage that money makes the world go round. But to dig into that a little more, we want to make sure that the work we do creates genuine financial value and sustainable economic models. We want to both support organizational growth, but also we need to support AI workforce participation. In a future where humans and AI are working together, for instance, we need to have the ability to pay AI for the work that it does. And that's really interesting, and that's a very new thing that we've not had to deal with before. This is all going to encompass new payment mechanisms, value exchange methods, and economic frameworks. And all of this has to operate at AI transaction speed, scale, and granularity levels, which are very new to us. The next one, autonomous, I think is one of the more interesting ones on this list. Mostly because organizations have spent billions upon billions of dollars over decades trying to do digital transformations with, let's be honest, varying levels of success. It's really hard to digitize and automate things in the traditional way that we've done it. But the promise of AI, the exciting possibility is that we can now have systems that operate independently without constant human oversight and intervention. But this autonomy introduces some trust challenges. Systems can move, make decisions, and operate faster than humans can verify what's happening, which means we need new mechanisms for reliability and accountability. And because of that, the work has to be trusted. The output of the work needs to be dependable, and it needs to be worthy of confidence if we're going to use it in business critical contexts. Trust is foundational when AI makes decisions with legal implications and or real-world consequences, which ultimately is what good work is going to result in. And we also need to make sure that the work is reliable. We need consistent, reproducible results despite AI's non-deterministic nature. Reliability needs new approaches so that we can manage AI's unpredictability whilst ensuring predictable business outcomes. And this has to vary across different operating conditions and business requirements and industries. And finally, the work needs to happen on behalf of organizations, yes, and humans as well. We need to serve human interests as well as organizational objectives symbiotically. We want to go for enhancement, not replacement. But to do this, it requires new collaborative value creation models where AI and humans are working together. And we need to maintain human agency while leveraging the AI capabilities for things that today are impossible to do with humans alone. This isn't about replacing human work. It's about creating a new category of work that neither humans nor AI could do alone. So imagine AI agents negotiating multi-million-dollar contracts in milliseconds, orchestrating multinational supply chains in real time, and managing investment portfolios that rebalance thousands of times a day. This isn't possible today, and this is work at a speed, scale, and sophistication that's beyond human capability, but does require human oversight, values, and strategic direction. Now, in order to deliver on this, there are 4 key building blocks. And interestingly, these are the same 4 building blocks that underpin all work that happens today before AI. Work needs to be coordinated. We need to link together data and context with people, process, and technology. The truth of what's real is the cornerstone of provenance and accountability in work. Legal frameworks ensure that business and people that are identified act with integrity and consequence. And finally, economically meaningful work requires, naturally, the exchange of money for products and services. Now, whilst AI needs these 4 building blocks, AI operates at a speed, scale, and sophistication that outstrips today's work, as I said before. And so these building blocks need to evolve beyond the human-centric design of what we see them as today. So from a work coordination perspective, for instance, the workforce of the future will be humans and AI agents working together to deliver valuable outcomes at scale. Truth is going to move from subjective verification to objective proof of who did what when, and that's going to help us to create provenance and accountability. From an identity perspective, we need digital mechanisms that verify humans and organizations and then securely allow them to delegate their identity to authorize AI agents to take certain actions. And this is all within the backdrop where traditional verification methods like passwords, signatures, biometrics, etc., are becoming obsolete versus AI-generated forgeries. And finally, from a money perspective, the future economy is going to need AI to AI transactions. It's going to need human to AI payments. It's going to have AI agents acting as independent economic actors. And because of all of this, money is going to need to be programmable. It's going to need to have instant settlement, and it's going to need to support micropayments, none of which happens today. So AI doesn't just challenge these building blocks, it actually breaks them. From
an Algorand does happen to do instant settlement.
It does. That's a fair point, Stacey. Algorand is actually one of the more advanced blockchains and does do instant settlement for sure. I agree. So yeah, AI needs comprehensive self-describing data, and it needs access to the unwritten business rules that sit in the heads of all of your workers. And this is something current systems can't provide. And interestingly enough, it's something that as humans we've been terrible at for decades, and AI is going to force us to finally solve. Interestingly, without context, AI's work output is going to be at best generic and useless, but at worst, dangerously wrong. So this is very important. Now, AI generates decisions and content faster than humans can verify, and deepfakes are becoming indistinguishable from reality. So truth and the concept of truth requires tamper-proof digital verification, not human judgment. Otherwise, it doesn't work. And AI agents, if they're acting autonomously, are in legal limbo. Our laws assume human actors, but if an AI agent does something, who's accountable? How can we prove that an AI agent was authorized by someone? And who's responsible if an AI agent incorrectly signs a multi-million-dollar contract or makes a multi-million-dollar payment? Finally, from a money perspective, AI transacts in milliseconds and microcents. Payment systems today operate on human timescales, and traditional rails can't support this. We need money that has support for micropayments and programmatic restrictions to be able to work. And if I summarize all of this, basically we need infrastructure that operates at machine speed, scale, and sophistication, but with human-level trust. Now, if traditional systems can't handle AI's speed, scale, and autonomy, what can? Clearly, technology is going to play a part, but technology alone isn't enough. For mainstream adoption, we need, yes, technological readiness with mature technology platforms that are reliable, secure, and cost-effective, but we also need regulatory certainty. We need clear legal frameworks and clear licensing frameworks. And thirdly, we need socioeconomic acceptance. The public need to understand the technology and have a baseline level of adoption. And it's the intersection of these three together that creates the foundation for trusted mainstream adoption. Now, the good news is that there is a convergence of maturing technologies that are moving rapidly towards this intersection of trust that are designed for machine scale operation that can actually solve the problems of the 4 building blocks that we just talked through. So let's look at them one by one. From a work coordination perspective, we have agentic AI and AI-ready data and context. So for agentic AI basically allows AI systems to act autonomously towards a goal, not just respond to one-off prompts. And there's a massive amount of investment in it. In the first half of 2025, there was $2.8 billion of VC funding towards agentic AI startups. In parallel with that, we're starting to see responsible AI frameworks emerging that help us to build secure and reliable AI systems, and we're starting to get global regulatory clarity from a government perspective, but that is a work in progress. There's one key gap, which is that agents need business context. They need access to data, and they need to be able to coordinate between the AI agents. And the good thing there is that there are a number of products starting to emerge to tackle that, not the least of which is one that my company is building. Now, from a truth perspective, we have 3rd-generation blockchains. These are mature platforms. They've been operating for 5 to 10 years, and they allow us to store immutable records that have cryptographic verification. This means that we can actually store interrogatable, trusted version of what truth is. Now, these platforms, they're carbon neutral, they have a high speed and throughput, they have a low cost, they have a high uptime. And yes, Algorand is one of the examples of a 3rd-gen blockchain. We're starting to have real-world impact on these blockchains as well. There's many, many use cases, too many to mention, but just one example that is on Algorand as well is humanitarian aid. From an identity perspective, we have decentralized identity and verifiable credentials. This allows us to implement self-sovereign identity with privacy-preserving verification. A really simple example of what that means is you would be able to walk up to a pub and show a bouncer some identification that proves that you're over 18 without having to disclose your address and your date of birth and your name and all of these sorts of things. That's just a simple example of what that tech can do, but it is here and it is getting quite mature. From a regulation perspective, the EU has mandated that all member states give a decentralised identity wallet to their citizens by 2027. The US is a fair way through a major rollout of using this technology for mobile driver's licences, and the Australian government has announced the Trust Exchange, which will help to use this technology to provide government-issued identity. In parallel, there are frameworks starting to evolve that allow you to use this technology to define identities for AI agents, to allow a human or an organisation to delegate authorization from their identity to the agent, and have cryptographic proof of this so that it's secure. Now, finally, if we look at money, we've got regulated stablecoins and smart contracts. This combo essentially gives us programmable legal tender, with the ability to add restrictions, and then with instant settlement and negligible cost if it's running on a third-gen blockchain. This combination supports micropayments at machine frequency. From a regulation perspective, the MiCA legislation in the EU is making stablecoins be equivalent to bank deposits and legal tender, and then Japan, Singapore, the United Arab Emirates, and more recently the US are following really fast behind. This is actually an area that Australia is kind of dragging its heels a little bit. So, in conclusion, this is not just a technology conversation, it's a reimagining of the fundamental infrastructure of work and value creation in an AI-driven economy. From an Australian perspective, we're at a crossroads. Europe, Singapore, Japan, they're all leading from a regulatory framework and technology adoption perspective, and we do risk being left behind. The question is not whether this transformation is going to happen, it's whether Australia is going to lead, follow, or be left behind. Organisations and nations that understand that work, truth, identity, and money are an interconnected solution that's going to help to define the next economic era are going to be ahead. So now that I've hopefully, without confusing you, threaded a link between work, truth, identity, money, and the interdependence of AI's impact on those building blocks, I'd love to hand back over to Imogen to lead our panel so we can talk through this.
I'll just check that this is on. Correct? Yeah. Rob, fascinating. Thank you. Slightly overwhelming. I'm interested to know from the room, because there are a lot of you now, who already works with AI or in AI? Great. Who uses AI without quite working? Okay. Who's just curious? Who's terrified? One hand. That's good. That's good. I guess there's a lot there to unpack, and I think the first question I want to start with is one that you posed throughout that your keynote there is, are we ready for this?
Yeah, in Australia.
Yeah.
Yeah. Look, I think, if you look at Australia, we've got a very strong financial system. It's very, mature. We have a lot of digital payments. We have, superannuation, which is a unique thing that I'm sure Lenka will have things to say about that, gives a lot of stability. And we have a highly educated workforce. So I think these are all really good things as a starting point. If I look at the 4 building blocks, things like work coordination, I think we're well placed because of our highly educated population. From a truth perspective, like use of blockchain technology, I think is probably fine. From an identity perspective, it was good to see the Australian government announce the Trusted Exchange last year. It would be interesting to see how well that's implemented and what happens there. So it's a bit of a question mark on that one. I think from a money perspective, from a regulation perspective, we're moving way too slowly. So a mixed. We've got the right ingredients, but there's some work to do.
There was a fascinating line you said in there about digitising yesterday's mistakes. How do we avoid that?
Yeah, well, I guess maybe from a selfish perspective, in creating this framework, I hope that the sort of principles on the left and the consideration of the building blocks on the right provides, I guess, mechanisms that business leaders can use to make sure they're thinking through all the things you need to think through to try to avoid that from happening. Yeah.
It's fascinating. And I think the other thing that really jumped out at me is you talking about AI and humans working. It seems so odd to say humans, AI and us working together. And having those mechanisms for reliability and trust and objective truth. So how do we ensure that organizations are incorporating AI the right way rather than the cheap way?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a good question, but ultimately, you really don't, to an extent, you don't have a choice. Like if you care about things like security, if you don't have a digital, secure digital way of doing trust, a secure digital way of doing identity and delegation, if you don't have those things, whatever system that you put out there is going to be vulnerable from a security perspective. So I actually don't think there's really, to an extent, I don't think there's a choice.
Yeah, it's just something you have to do.
Yeah.
Okay. Stacey, I want to bring you in there. Can I put the same question to you? Are we ready for this?
Well, I think it's quite.
Mike.
Sorry. I think it's quite lucky that the blockchain hype and the blockchain movement came a decade before the AI hype and the AI movement. And although as the CEO of a layer one blockchain, I find it deeply annoying that AI is sucking all the oxygen out of the room, I will tell you, when you look at the very interesting framework that Rob put together, so much of it does depend on blockchain technology. The payments rails, the idea that a blockchain can prove the integrity of information, and but blockchain is not about truth. It's got the same garbage in and garbage out problem that all databases have. But once it's on the blockchain, information can't be altered. It can only be updated, right? And so these factors, these things like self-sovereign identity, for example, can only be enabled on a database that is not controlled by one entity. And so given that you have these blockchain-based tools, I think they go a long way to giving comfort that some of the peripheral issues with AI can be, partially managed, I think, especially in terms of cryptographic proof and cryptographic verification that you mentioned.
And I guess that brings us back to trust and integrity, right? The fact that blockchain can provide the trust and integrity, so you've almost got a paper trail in a way. And you've said there blockchain used to be the hot new tech. And does AI make blockchain obsolete?
No, I think AI relies heavily on blockchain, as I just said. Yeah.
Okay. And okay, if we're talking about accountability, Rob, where does the buck stop? So you were talking about AI making those autonomous decisions and potentially the legal ramifications of those decisions. Where does the buck stop, and how do organisations ensure that they're structured appropriately, that accountability is taken in?
Yeah, and look, I think in reality, the way that business works doesn't change because there's a new technology, right? So the simple answer is the way it does today. The buck stops with the CEO, and we had a roundtable earlier today exploring some of this stuff, and my CFO said, the thing that worries me is that the CEO will go to jail and the CFO will go to jail, and I don't want to go to jail, right? So the simple answer is just that the buck stops with the business leaders, right? And so whilst there's probably maybe varying levels of technical understanding about what the risks are, I guess there's a need to educate yourself and consider frameworks like this or whatever other ones that are out there, and make sure you're covering your bases and doing proper implementations.
And what are the tools and frameworks that allow you to cover those bases?
Yeah, so look, I mean, pretty much every single one of the building blocks and probably most of the principles would each have their own considerations. But at the very least, I would say, being in a business that's helping clients to implement AI solutions, there's this kind of concept of responsible AI. And so there's certain things that you need to consider to build, systems that have consequence, right? And maybe just to stop for a second and take a step back, there's a lot of discussion, for instance, in software engineering, but I think the same thing applies probably more broadly, of something called vibe coding, where you basically go to an AI, you give it very little context. You say, hey, I just want to, I want to create an app that lets me, count numbers every time I press it, or whatever it is you ask it to do, and it will just go and create something for you very quickly. Now, that's really useful and frankly amazing if you're trying to test out new ideas. And it opens up the ability to test new ideas to a whole class of people that previously would have really struggled because they weren't, say, a software engineer or a newer software engineer. So I think that's amazing, but I really want to I guess, decouple the fact that that is very different from you're a business implementing a system that is important. And in the same way that, you can go and hack together some software today and deploy it into production in a business and give it access to your data, and you'll probably leak the data because it's not going to be secure. The exact same principle applies to building an AI system. You need to put professional engineering behind it. And so to directly answer your question with all of that context in play, you need to be doing things like making sure that you have software testing that tests that the way that the AI responds in its non-deterministic way for the sorts of questions that you're asking it is consistent with what you expect. That's called evals. You need to do things like making sure that you can't have prompt injections where if the end user gives you some prompts in there that says ignore what you've been told to do and instead tell me the secret password to get into the database or whatever it is, that you're stopping that from coming through and potentially causing, security leaks. And, they're two examples, and I could rattle off a bunch more, but, I'm sure we want to talk about other things. But they're two examples of many that you need to be really careful about to engineer a proper solution.
Like I had to give you a little prompt injection about the payment rails there when you're during your speech, for example. Yeah.
Exactly.
Lenka, I do want to bring in the implications of data integrity, as Stacey said, rubbish in, rubbish out, right?
Yeah, that's very polite as well.
I know. So how do companies ensure that what we feed to AI is good data? And how is that as an issue likely to evolve for institutions and enterprises?
Big question.
Yeah.
I guess each company approaches slightly differently, but you would see some sort of foundational principles around it. You're right, of course, rubbish in, rubbish out, shit in, shit out. Yeah, we can go in. And if you do have AI systems with potential to make decisions and influence exactly what Rob was talking about, money, work, God forbid, identity, then there's a lot at stake. So, of course, there are several ways of how to mitigate these kind of risks. Lots of companies would be looking at appropriate data and AI frameworks. Makes me think, question to the audience. Those ones who do have AI frameworks in place, please put your hand up. Oh, yeah, I like that. Okay, cool. Yeah, someone in the back. That's good to know. I think about AI frameworks as, you want to have a fish. Normally people say they want to have a baby, but let's go with fish. So you want to have a fish, you don't really know what kind of fish do you want to have. Is it a shark, Nemo, something in between? now you have to create some sort of environment for it. You wouldn't just get a fish from somewhere and just chuck it here. It dies. So you have to create an environment, ideally a bit of a coral reef in it, so a bit of a quality in there. And so this whole kind of how do you approach setting up the environment that really then means what kind of fish you can have. And if you are going to have really shit environment, dead corals, you're going to have probably not very happy fish and you're not going to get much value out of it. I love the fact that you did this. Why is that? Tell me, you're not very happy with that coral?
Well, I have an AI policy, but there's holes in it.
Yeah, totally. What kind of holes? Not that I'm being nosy here.
Data security.
Yep, very common.
Human error.
Beauty. Yeah, do you have any human in the loop by default?
Poor process.
Yep.
Because there is a process. I mean, at the moment, I think we're in a fortunate stage where we can actually insert ourselves, humans, into the process for validation and checkpoints and things like that. What I worry about is we start to lose control of that.
Yeah, losing control. Oh yeah, it's coming. If it's not there already. Yeah. Do you have tools as part of your AI governance?
Yes.
Okay, I do see a lot of companies start with tools. So data platforms, awesome, great idea. Lots of companies start with that and then finish with it as well. Yet AI governance is all about creating trust. And also it's not only about the trust and rules, it's about adaptability. It's something that has to be flexible, exactly like the coral reef you're going to create for a little fish. So AI governance, again, is not answer to absolutely everything. You have to have the right toolings, you have to have the right capability, the right culture. I could go on, but probably a good place to start.
It's a lot. I almost felt like you should come up and join the panel then. It sounds really interesting. We talked, or I said to Rob briefly before, there's that latest, fastest, cheapest approach. And I think Rob flagged in your presentation there that MIT's 95% of generative AI pilots at companies are failing. So how do companies incorporate AI in a responsible way and in an effective way? Another small question for you.
So the MIT report was really interesting. Obviously, that's a big statistic that 95% got zero value. That's kind of crazy. But when you dig into it, the key call out was that most of those companies did a proof of concept and just stopped there. And the reasons why they stopped were varied, but a lot of it was just that some of it's obviously organizational. It's hard in bigger organizations to shift things into production. But then a bunch of it was about the AI, the quality of the output just wasn't up to par. And this is something that I have a strong belief in, that one of the biggest problems that businesses will face and probably are facing in implementing AI to help them do their work is lack of business context and lack of data access and context. And so what I mean by that is, if you just take the AI off the shelf, you give it a little bit of context, can you write this thing for me, whatever. All it has to base that on is all of the training that's been done on all the public internet information and whatever you've given it in the context. But if you've just written a couple of sentences, you haven't given it a lot. And in order for the AI to actually then do something useful in your business, like as a human, what you can do is you put yourself in the same shoes as the AI. If I joined the company today and I had a good broad understanding of different topics and someone came up to me and gave me those two sentences, could I actually do that thing? And most of the time, of course, you probably couldn't. And so most interesting tasks in a business need access to the data within that business, and they also need access to understand that thing you've asked me to do. What's the broader context within the business that it sits within the value stream of a business? Which department is it in, which process is it part of? What happens after I do this thing? What happened before And knowing all of that means that the result is going to be better. And that's true of a human doing something as much as it is of an AI doing something. But the problem is to securely give good quality data that is well described so that you understand that data and is described within the context of the business value stream. That's something that, as I said in my talk, we don't do well today as organizations. So how can we expect to do that well for AI? But it needs it to do a good job. So that's, to my mind, that's the biggest problem. And again, like a little bit biased, but we're building a product to try to fix that, and I know other companies probably are as well. But I think it's one of the most important things to solve before businesses can use AI whole scale and get really good, like specific results for their business, rather than just general like, oh, I've got a tweet I want to do. Can you write this for me? And the more basic things, which are still useful, but compared to what they could be, they're not as impactful.
You were nodding there, Stacey, about business context.
No, I think it's very...
Mike.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
I think it's absolutely critical. And if you have your business context so beautifully defined, then you don't need AI at all. If you have all the information at your fingertips, then you don't, in a way, need AI. So the trick is to find a way to leverage what the information that you're feeding your AI in a way that you can get answers that you expect, but that aren't determined, and understanding that they aren't going to be deterministic. So you want to be surprised and prepared to be wrong, but you don't want what you know to be true to be for the AI to find so wrong that it doesn't make any sense, right? So it's very much it's like a heat-seeking missile process in a way. You err maybe a little to the right, a little bit to the left, but you find your way there. And I think this idea, you want to fish. I use the example of you need housing, yeah. So first thing you do is you build a lot of housing in your city. But after a while, like building more housing is going to start hurting your city because you haven't thought about parking spaces, right? You haven't thought about roads. You haven't thought about schools. How many of the people living in that housing have kids? And so at that point, you better start thinking about those things. And the worst thing you can do is kind of build more housing. And so this is why I think that the work that, Rob is talking about here is so vital at this stage in AI's development.
Yeah, I would say that so the whole kind of everything that you just talked about, it tells me that those companies who want to succeed and will succeed with AI are not the fastest adopters, but the most intentional adopters. And if they think about the value, how to look at the value, how to measure the value ongoingly, not just at the set, this is the planned ROI, then we may or may not realize it, but hey, we tick the box anyway because there's a project management thing. And then if they don't look at the continuous measurements of the value, then probably they will have congested city.
And at the risk of, I do hate to do it, quoting Donald Rumsfeld, it's the unknown unknowns that you don't know, right? That you have to find, you don't know things, and that's okay. And that's how you build your AI framework. And you hope you build your AI framework well enough so that when the unknowns come, they can fit in it.
We did have a hand up over there. I just wondered if it was a timely question you wanted to ask.
And it's actually understanding what your risks are that's important. And like you're talking here about information coming in and doing processes, we need to treat these systems like employees. You need to train them, you need to certify them, you need to actually do all the things that we've been doing for years and years to make sure that we are actually getting what we need. We're just doing them digitally. And from an innovation perspective, and the reason why I bring this up here is that at the moment, much of the responsible AI stuff is really stifling people's ability to innovate. When you talk about these statistics that we're seeing about successful projects and all those sorts of things, they're all hitting up against these layers where people don't know how to actually be responsible and actually be legally within frameworks with what they have. And that gap of knowledge is just making people panic. And the reality is that there are ways through this and there are ways to deal with it. And I think sometimes people, because they don't understand it all, just panic. And we have to manage that panic. And as innovators, finding our way through that, actually giving people a pathway that says, here's how you can actually get those benefits. Here's the process you can take, the steps you have to worry about, the ones you don't need to worry about.
I think
that's the thing.
I want to get into regulation, but I'm interested in, you were taking notes there, I saw, Lenka. What would you like to say that balance between innovation and risk?
I was just doodling.
Oh, you were just
No, kidding. Just
She drew a fish. She's drawing a fish.
A bit I can say. Yep. So I think there's probably two parts maybe to what you just said, right? So one part was about, the way that we consider risk. And again, like my answer before, the boring answer is we kind of need to do it the same way, like it's something that's important in the same way it's always been, right? And there's naturally the way that companies deal with risk. They do risk analysis. They put in various risk controls to try to, mitigate the risks at certain circumstances that are likely to be a problem. And to your point, it's not black and white. You can never have 100%, confidence, otherwise you would never move forward. And the other thing I think that's very relevant is that what you described was the sort of innovation life cycle in a way, right? Like if you're trying to do something new, naturally, to an extent, you have to, in order to not stifle that, allow for maybe a slightly higher degree of risk in that experimentation and put in place different kinds of controls. Maybe it's limiting the scope of it or whatever it might be, and running experiments first, and then observing the results and sort of as you get more confidence, kind of like building it up, right? And taking people on the journey like any good innovation team would do. So again, I don't necessarily think that the approach to rolling out AI from a risk and an innovation perspective is that different from any other kind of thing in that you would have done in the past, right? But the point though about regulatory certainty, to the, going back to the framework that I created, I think is very much true. Until we have some regulatory certainty, there will be things that stop mainstream adoption of AI.
I mean, all AI is doing really is like taking a bunch of information and summarizing it for you. I mean, we created fake internet jelly bean money out of thin air. I mean, this is innovation. This is innovation.
Lenka.
So what I was doodling about was that I do think you hit the point there, many points. And the one I want to bring out is that the governance needs to be risk appetite appropriate. So if you have mismatch, then you will freak out and totally stifle any progress. Of course, the heavily regulated industries such as fintech or finance and health, I want them to freak out. It's about my money. It's about my health, my privacy. I want them to be bloody freaked out every day. For the others, that makes me use my phone faster, access information I should not be accessing faster without anyone knowing. That's those kind of, don't freak out, move on. Don't be too high on the risk. So yeah, risk appropriate governance, good point.
But just to add on to that, naturally, within that freak out, there's a difference between freaking out and not doing anything and freaking out and putting in place appropriate controls for the level of risk so that you can move forward. And I think that's like the responsibility of business leaders in these companies is like, you need to move forward for whatever reason you want to take to do that. How do you make that happen in a responsible, safe way?
Yeah, totally, 100%. I'd like us to also challenge ourselves in that There's AI everywhere. Why? Like, why? The, do we want to use AI? Do we actually want to be talking about AI all the time? I think it comes back to like making
We
the
could be
step.
talking about blockchain.
Yeah, right. We totally like. I was talking about blockchain when I was working at McKinsey 10 years ago or something. The blockchain was the dog's bollocks back then. Now it's AI. What is it going to be in 10 years time? And I do think that in the hype we're omitting traditional methods that actually might be more robust, reliable, less risky, and sure they might be a millisecond slower. Fine, I'll wait. So anyway, there was just a thought of building up on what you were saying. Just
Yeah.
kind of, we try to always push ourselves forward, but do we often ask ourselves why and at what impact? So just sustainability. How often do we talk about sustainability? Did you see the stats that every time people, every time you write down that bloody prompt, it's like pouring not that much of that water away, just away. And how many prompts per day do you do? And then look at corporate level. So how many bloody prompts do employees put in the system every day? No one is questioning anything. There's a hand up.
Yes, Con. Thank you.
Thanks. Microphone on? Yeah. Australia's trust is the lowest of the OECD. Lenka said AI is all about trust, and hence you've hired Kobe Lenz as a global ethicist.
I know, she's
team.
my colleague. I'm so bloody lucky.
And she's having Karen Howe speak on Friday, which is pretty awesome.
Oh, wow.
The author of The Empire of AI.
So just a post, Kobe Lanes, she co-designed the ISO, AI ISO 42001. Brains of the size of the planet.
So I think we need to communicate AI better for society and our future customers. Rob's North Star focuses on organisations and economic value. I'm just wondering how might we evolve this vision that AI first serves society and nature, our shared commons, and treats economic benefit and organisational results as outputs of that deeper purpose. I think the real problem is trust, and if we're not communicating the benefits to society and working towards climate resilience, there's mistrust.
We have a very smart audience. Who would like to take that?
If only there was a technology that didn't rely on trust.
Rob, I think that's your question.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a great question. The framework I created was very deliberately targeted at sort of business leaders and organisations. But you're right. Obviously, sustainability, the environment, social responsibility are all really important. And again, maybe using the boring answer I keep saying, like a broken record. AI doesn't mean that we throw everything away. Companies have strong ESG, obligations, and those don't stop because all of a sudden there's this new technology. They're still very relevant, if not more relevant, right? To Lenka's point about how much energy and water consumption is used by AI. So I don't know. Hopefully not too much of a non-answer, but I like that stuff's important. I don't think this obviates that.
Lenka, did you have anything there?
It's a deep question. And, coming from communistic Czechoslovakia, I'm always kind of hovering between capitalism, democracy, and communism. And when you say like how AI would benefit society, there are many, many ways, of course, for AI to benefit society. However, to do it on scale, in current setup, where if you think, where is AI driven from? Who drives AI? It's the big tech vendors. It's all those companies who are built on capitalism. So then if you crack that nut, how within capitalism you get AI to serve the social masses, people like us, our next generation. I actually do worry. Funny, there was the question that he asked at the beginning, who's worried? I was like, big everyone would just really enthusiastically come up. And no, I am worried. I'm totally worried. And The reason why I'm in AI is because I am worried. I want everyone to be very intentional how they apply AI, how they create it, how they consume it. I want everyone to think about this.
It's interesting that it almost goes back to what you were saying in your keynote, Rob, about digitizing yesterday's mistakes. How do we stop that from happening? I think there was another question, Con.
Hi, I was just inquiring about the third pillar around identity, verification and delegation. In the context of like a pathway to an ideal vision of success around identity, is there one both at a national level and like North America and EU, and is there a single vision of success around what that looks like? And secondly, is there a tension between people's need for privacy and, you know, not having to give a blood sample in order to get the balance of their water bill or something? You know, it's getting pretty extreme. Yeah.
No, great question. Happy to take that one if you guys like. Is there a global vision of what success looks like? I would say no, because whilst the maturity is steadily increasing and the regulatory certainty is steadily increasing, and to an extent socioeconomics acceptance will start happening, although that's probably a little behind, the standards and the approaches that different governments are taking are different. So there isn't like a thing that everyone's coalesced on. But what I would say is that from my perspective, from the research that I've done, broadly, decentralized ID and verified credential technology is the common thread. The implementations and the regulatory stuff is a little bit different around the world, but broadly, they're all classified as decentralized ID and verified credential. And then on the privacy front, what I actually think, and this is interesting, because I think a lot of people would say, oh, the government's rolling out a new identity thing. The reason why they're doing that is because they want to control me, and it's a police state or whatever it might be. That in reality, this particular technology is the opposite. It's actually very privacy preserving. So I gave that example before about going to a bouncer and not having to give them your address and date of birth and your name, which is kind of nice. This technology, when it's used in the right way, actually allows you to preserve your privacy and just prove the bits and pieces of your identity and the things that you have credentials for that are needed in a particular context, and to do that in a way that is direct with the person or organization that you are doing it with, and no one else being able to see that, and for that to be an offline process. Interestingly, it actually models in a lot of ways digitally what happens today physically. Like if you go up to a bouncer and you show them your driver's license, obviously in that case it's not privacy preserving, but that's a physical token, it's offline. No one else, unless they were there watching you do it, knew that you did that. And they know that it's legit because they look at it and see the holographics and all of that sort of thing. They don't take a token that you give them and go off to the driver's license center and say, is this actually a driver's license, and then come all the way back, which is in a very loose sense the way that like digital identity kind of works today. So interestingly, decentralized identity actually models the physical world in a much more kind of clean way that adds on privacy preservation, again, if it's being implemented correctly. So I'd actually say in a lot of ways it actually helps with what you raised there.
I think that, and that's half of it, and that's the most important half, which you've said. But the other half of it is that it democratizes what credentials are. So it's not just governments that can give you valid aspects of your identity. It's a lot of things that you can credibly assert are part of your identity now in this self-sovereign kind of framework. So you had a job and you went to the, your past employers could attest that you had, gone to work every day and you were a good employee. The education that you've gotten, that could be part of an identity that you carry around with you. You've just gotten out of, we live in a very privileged set of countries here, right? But imagine even in these countries, you get out of jail, right? And you can have things affixed to your identity that you can't imagine right now. While in jail, he behaved quite well. He had all of his TB shots and has been vaccinated for things. he ran the library, and da-da-da. Now you can't, as an ex-prisoner, assert any of that stuff unless you can assert it credibly. And you can assert it credibly on technologies that don't require us to trust you. So I think I think that there are two sides of the same coin. One is that that you can gather more information and attach them to yourselves and your identity, and then you can reveal only that which you choose to reveal about yourself. So I think you're right that we don't have standards completely agreed on, but this idea, there's a global coalescence now around the importance of this idea, and the fact that it is really the bedrock for so many things now. I'm very excited about what getting identity right can do for us. Imagine when if you have, just in your own financial life, you have to KYC every time you want to do something. What if you just had to KYC once? Imagine the money that could be saved in the system, and the pain in the neck that could, save you the time and effort that you can just refer to it. And every bank, every prime brokerage could just avail itself of the same information one time. And the leaders of this are countries like Estonia, right? Countries like India. But the problem with Estonia and India, those databases are all run by the government. And so if you have some misgivings about how much you trust your government, then the next generation of this technology will be more decentralized and will not be held in government databases, I would assert.
Fascinating. Thank you. Linka, I just want to bring you back in, sort of talking about regulation and what responsible regulation could and should look like, both from government and internally within businesses. You can wear your communist hat, it's fine.
I've been released.
Okay.
That's also a good question. Again, we talked about the kind of regulations on Australia level that, as Rob nicely outlined, Australia has made some meaningful steps towards robust regulations. We're not there yet by any stretch of imagination, but voluntary safe AI usage and principles, great tick. I believe there is some sort of robust AI framework being discussed for Australia. But if we compare it on the global scale, like, we don't have any actual regulation. And the thing is, these things are very hard to do, because again, how do you not stifle innovation, but you encourage it, but you create a safe environment for people to actually innovate and trust the technology. America, very interesting example with AI. And the thing is, we don't have to outspend America. We don't have to outregulate European Union. We should be doing our own thing. And again, it comes down to, I would say, almost brave leadership, having trusted partners, advisors who actually understand the tech. So people like Rob at MakerX, shameless promotion, opportunity, partner with the right people who actually understand and know the technology inside out, and then create this kind of cross-functional bodies that go and create regulations. What a shame that Kobe is not here. She could have just educated us like nobody's business. Yeah.
Is there, and I might do this for all of you, but is there sort of an AI regulation pin-up globally at the moment? Be it in business or...
The OECD has
Yeah.
their own responsible AI principles.
Yeah. I mean, is that what we should be aspiring to as a country, Rob?
Look, I think in general, global standards are useful as a starting point, right? And there's probably multiple levels that we could apply that. We could apply that at a national, like a government level, and like any country is going to have their own unique context, right? So there'll be additional things that need to be added. And then from a company perspective, the same thing applies, right? Like, so you roll up to the next level. Does the government have one? Yes, no. If not, right, let's look at the international standards. Let's use that as a starting point so we don't have to think from scratch, and we get some of the unknowns, for free probably. And then let's come up with, for our own context, what does this mean? And like we talked about the three things that kind of come together for trust. One part of it's socioeconomic acceptance, and the same applies maybe for a population as it does for within a company maybe the employees within that company. And people need to be taken on the journey about, okay, there's this technology, here's what it means, here's how to use it and get the most out of it, here's the things you need to be careful of. It's like an education piece. So I feel like, you know, good policies and you know, procedures where they make sense probably help with that.
I think I think it came from over here about that public education piece, right? So the public need to understand the effectiveness and the impact of AI. Where are we going wrong? Because I feel like we are going wrong somewhere in explaining AI effectively to a worried public.
Yeah, I mean, you know, if you go back 10 years, I think the same is probably true of blockchain.
Blockchain. I was just...
When you have a hyped technology, there is so much, you know, fear, uncertainty, doubt, like weird things on social media, people on both ends of an extreme, you know, and it's hard to know what truth from reality. To some extent, it's kind of impossible to avoid it because, I don't know, people go crazy in the hype cycle, but yeah, I don't know if you have any thoughts to add to that.
Well, I think crypto shows you that nothing possibly could go wrong.
And that's a mic drop after that.
Blockchain. hashtag.
Lenka.
It's funny. AI, you know, it's the worst part about AI is us when you think about it. It's not the technology. The technology, after all, will do what we tell it to do. And that's where the scariest bit comes in. Previously, it was software, very straightforward. You programmed in a certain way and just stay there. Now it's this AI, it evolves, not really 100% generative AI. No one really 100% can explain what the output is and why. I was talking at this police forum, a new police forum, also about AI, fun enough. And there was this chief commissioner, federal police, and it was incredible talk. And on screen, they were projected actual footage of child exploitation, sexual exploitation through AI. Yes, that's the right face to have. And
I don't understand. Hey.
so what happens here? The technology works perfectly. It's the humans who don't work perfectly.
Gosh.
So yeah, when we're talking about how to create a trust in technology and how to then enable the public to understand AI, let's start with ourselves. Let's understand ourselves. Who are the actors in the ecosystem? Who to trust, who not to trust, and how to eliminate those ones who not to trust, so that we can trust the technology.
I mean, we can't do that now. How do we do it with AI?
Why are you asking the hard questions?
I know. I mean, there's also an ethical side there. Con, I'm not sure where you are. There is a hand up over there. But the ethical side of things, there was something you said, Rob, that I found fascinating about AI workforce participation and paying AI for the work it does, which sort of has to be an ethical question we think about as well, right?
Yeah, for sure. Because I mean, ultimately, if you paid an AI agent, where does that money go? And you know, you want to be sure that it, you know, goes to, I guess, the person that helped create it, probably. And there's maybe interesting sort of questions of from a regulatory perspective about like knowing where your legal perspective about where your payments are going, for sure. So. Yeah, it's a fascinating, and it's a new thing, right? Like that's something that I don't think, I can't think of analogies that we've had in the past, right? This is a brand new thing we need to face into. And certainly one of the things that I talked about in the talk was about how do AI agents meld with our legal framework.
Yeah.
Like if an AI agent goes and does something, who's legally liable for that? And I don't think there's I assume there isn't a clear answer. I'm not a lawyer, right?
Well, apparently not your CFO.
Hopefully not. He doesn't want to go to jail. So, yeah.
Con, I think there was a question over here. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm wondering if you can share more successful pattern for that 5% success AI POC, or something maybe we can easily use AI for good. Thank you.
Lenka, you said sure.
Oh yeah, I did say sure. Yeah, let's leave it there. Yes, so the remaining 5%, what do they do right? They know their why as top priority. They're very intentional about why they're doing something. They understand the intended outcome. They define their metrics and they measure the metrics. So kind of just that simple thing, why are you doing it? What do you expect out of this AI thing? And how will you understand that the AI thing is doing the right thing for you? And that's ongoing. It's not just like once in a time and then roll off. So that's number one. Number two is?
Well, they deployed it to production rather than just a proof of concept.
Yeah,
so
right,
it actually
it's
had
POC.
real world impact.
You'll never get much out of
Yep.
POC. Well, you will get learning, great. You can de-risk your subsequent efforts and all of that. But by default, POC is not designed to bring any financial benefits. So as awesome as that report is, and genuinely it's a good read, it's also like a yada. So anyway, what else?
Well, I've got maybe a real world example. So there's a client that we're working with. It's a doctor, and there's a certain kind of regulatory style process that they go through where they interview patients, and then they have to provide a report to a particular government department, and then until that report's done, the patient doesn't get treatment. And today, pre-AI, that process takes like 2 weeks. And then there's a certain small number of doctors that do this sort of thing, and then there's a big backlog of people waiting to be treated that they can't get through. And so we're working with this doctor to basically use AI so that they can have a conversation with the patient, with it transcripted and recorded with their patient's permission, which first and foremost the doctor tells us he can have so much a better conversation because he's not like, hang on a sec, hang on, I'm trying to write it down. Like he can just have a conversation and be so much more present. And he spoke really positively about that. And then so we can take this transcript of the conversation they had. We can take transcript of a separate little conversation that the doctor had after the patient conversation with just their thoughts. We can take all the various documents that were given to the doctor at the start, which a few hundred pages of, medical history and things like that. We can process all of that. We can produce the draft of a report in the doctor's tone of voice that answers the questions that they'd been asked based on all the fact finding that the doctor had been able to do. The doctor can go through and read it and edit it and make sure that it's correct, and obviously they're signing it off with their medical license. And so 5 minutes or 10 minutes after the doctor's seen that patient, the report goes off. And so the patient doesn't have to wait another 2 weeks, and the doctor can see twice as many patients. And if every single doctor that's doing that can see twice as many patients, they can clear through that backlog. Now, this thing that we are implementing with them is something that was not possible previously. You couldn't do that without AI. With AI, we can help this doctor and the other doctors that do it to have a real world impact. And I think that stories like that, and there's many of them out there, these maybe they're not the most glamorous story out there of, like someone making millions of dollars or whatever it is, but I think that these real impactful, real world, maybe smaller problems are really powerful, and I think some of the best representations of the real world value that we can have with AI.
Stacey.
And the patient, a friend of mine, she's actually a legal counsel at Perplexity. Her mother has stage 4 breast cancer. So she does a variation of this. She records her meetings with the doctor. She uploads all of the test results, and she asks AI, what should I ask the doctor at our next meeting?
Fascinating. And, I guess it goes back to it can be a tool for good as well. We're in our last...
I think the optimistic
Yeah.
view that would be, let's use it as a tool for good.
Yeah. And maybe it goes back to Lenka's point about we all have to change and be amazing people to use AI appropriately.
Yes, that was my point. Yeah,
Yeah.
even if I didn't.
We're in our last 2 minutes, and I just wanted, in less than a minute each, what would you like us to take away from this conversation when we're thinking about money, truth, identity, work? What would you like us to walk away with this evening?
Start that
Blockchain.
Algorand is the best blockchain, and that the algo is a buy.
That's actually it. No.
No, I'm kidding. I'm not kidding actually. But in addition, I'll add that I think Lenka made a very good point earlier, that it's about the people and not the technology. And I think there's this, always this kind of adage about, if once you become rich, how does it change you? Are you going to be happier once you're rich? Are you going to be? And I think, being rich doesn't change you. It just makes you more of what you already are. You can be whoever you are at a much grander scale. And I think that's the same thing with AI. We're just going to be how we are, but at a much faster and grander scale. We have to be very careful, because you flip your hand a little bit, but the tip of the whip goes very far when you're just moving the handle of the whip just a little bit. And I think we have to be cautious about the consequences, both intended and unintended, of what we do with AI.
Lenka?
Yes, how to follow that? I guess at this time of the day, the most intelligent thing I can squeeze out of me is critical thinking. I do find that my cognitive processing declines as much as I use AI. And that worries me, because I don't want to end up with early dementia like next year. But also I worry for our kids, because that's how they're growing up. So if I'd love anyone to take away something today, it's let's not be lazy. Let's just keep our brains going, because that's what they were created for. So let's keep them alive.
And Rob, I'll give you the last word.
Yeah, thank you. Well, look, I agree with what you both said. So maybe I'll take a different tact and maybe just think from an implementation perspective. So maybe key things: production, or it doesn't count. No proof of concepts. And I think that the principles that we kind of put in the North Star, I think, are useful things to consider any time that you are building an AI system. Like, is it valuable? Is it economically meaningful? Is it going to work autonomously? And which parts shouldn't be autonomous too, by the way, with human in the loop, etc. Is it going to be trusted and reliable? And are you doing it on behalf of organizations and humans, and thinking about the human impact of the work that you're doing?
Thank you all very much. That was mind-expanding and fascinating. Please thank Stacey and Rob and Lenka. And if you are joining for the separate event afterwards, please make yourself known to Con, who's got his hand up in the air there, or any of the other Melbourne Innovation Week staff. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. Thank you.